Hey guys, it's me, Oren Milne here with a really big video. Now, for those of you who come for my Dyspraxia content, sit tight because I'm going to go right into that in a minute. But I'd also like to point out that, there's going to be a Q&A part to this video, and there will be timestamps in the description if you do want to see that, as well as a channel update to kind of wrap up this video as a whole. And just one thing I want to keep in mind is I apologize ahead of time if this really isn't one of my best made or prettiest videos by any stretch. I've actually been dealing with pneumonia for the past week, and if anything, I'm probably going to cut a lot in this video just because of me taking every like 5 minutes just to cough. Don't worry, I got a spit bottle because I'm sure as hell not smoking while I have pneumonia. That kind of sucks, but it's taken me a while just to get to the point of recording this video, let alone doing what I have to do to get this video out and upload it and everything. So I apologize if it's taken me as long as it has. And don't ask me how I got pneumonia. I'm pretty sure it's not the coronavirus. At least I sure as hell hope not. But can't be the flu. I had the flu in the beginning of the month. You can't get the flu twice, can you? But I do want to start off this video and make a large part of this video somewhat of a follow-up video to a few of the videos I've made in the past, and not specifically angled at any specific video, but just touching on certain things and expanding on certain things that I may have understated a little bit too much, or have generalized to the point of making things seem a lot more simpler than they actually are. I am heavily appreciative because as a YouTuber as small as I am, typically from what I've seen both on Danknet and The Right Opinion and all these other things, being a YouTuber of relatively small size and gaining very small, steady growth in small increments, I don't really get as much hate or trolling or anything that most small YouTubers do really have to deal with coming up with. But I have gotten some very, very minor flack in a previous video called Memory with Dyspraxia. Honestly, I thought any real controversy or flack I would have gotten from that video would be maybe the thumbnail, because to some extent the thumbnail really isn't too related to the video. I make some kind of subpar graphic art thing, and I found it interesting and felt the need to put it in the video at the time because I really didn't think of this channel as that serious a thing until I started seeing the subs steadily going up. But also at that time, I did a hell of a lot more generalizing in those videos. And one of the biggest criticisms I've gotten in that video is that I stated that almost all dyspraxics tend to have a really bad short-term memory, and in exchange to compensate will have a better long-term memory. Now, something I try to state in almost all of my videos is that dyspraxia affects every dyspraxic differently. And like I mentioned in my first video, some people have it more verbal focused, others have it more physical focused, and some to some extent do have it more memory focused. And your dyspraxia can affect you in many ways, or just one way, or some ways. It's really not something that focuses on one specific area of the body like certain paralyses tend to. So I try to take this into account when making my videos, but again, my videos aren't meant to be replacements for Mayo Clinic, Wikipedia, or any real medical knowledge encyclopedias of any kind. So what I really do is a lot of generalization, and a lot of it is just a reflection of how I see the world around me. It's somewhat vlog-like, and while I do try to be as educational and informative as possible in these videos because it's the internet and you can get fact-checked in a second, For the sake of keeping my videos, even my longer ones, on somewhat of a shorter side than they really should be, it does require a sizable amount of generalization. And that does come to the extent of underplaying the complexity of dyspraxia and how different it is for every single dyspraxia sufferer. And so the memory thing, while it is a very significant part in my life personally, as my dyspraxia heavily affects my memory, my coordination, and mostly my physical attributes, it is true that these effects aren't seen commonly in some individuals with dyspraxia, and may seem like a lot of individuals with dyspraxia, seeing as how many people have commented on that video since then. But it is still a significant part of my life, and as a part of the video series of With Dyspraxia, as viewing living with dyspraxia from my point of view, that was something that I definitely could have worded better. Now, another thing that makes my older videos somewhat harder to watch for myself, simply because of how much I've studied into neurodevelopmental disorders and all these things in general, is when I've been falsely attributing certain things to being part of the autism spectrum. And also the frequent debate that I seemingly have with myself as to whether or not dyspraxia is considered part of the autism spectrum. I've touched a bit on this in some other videos, but I think the thing I really want to nail down is the whole idea of autism spectrum as a whole. And I've mentioned this a little bit in my video about all the neurodevelopmental disorders that tend to run in line with dyspraxia, in that a lot of people really try to avoid the autism label nowadays. And that's something that I've been guilty of in the past. But it's really kind of a hard thing to talk about, especially on the internet, seeing as how you have both extremes in both schools of, viewing autism in such a bizarre way. And I've come to learn that almost everything really is not really a black and white issue. Everything's kind of in shades of gray. And so while no, autism isn't nearly as bad as the darker side of the internet likes to paint it as, and as Christian makes a lot of people with autism tend to look, the whole idea of people who don't have disabilities being ableist in ways, or there being certain social cues or some social stigma that's making people with autism oppressed, and people with autism are, supposedly this and that much better than everyone else in this way or that way. Honestly, you shouldn't be putting any disability on a pedestal, because then it turns people towards kind of glamorizing and romanticizing said disorders. I mean, look at depression nowadays and how popular My Chemical Romance is. I'm gonna try not to be political about this, but ableism is one of the stupidest things I've seen on the internet. And it's just like the whole white people are bad people thing, or, all white people are this way, or pointing out flaws in white people logic and white people discourse is just as racist as doing the same thing with black or Hispanic culture. And it's kind of the same thing with ableism and disableism to some extent. And well, I think the real difference and why a lot more people tend to be more open to the whole ableism thing is because it does require something that is medical, and something that many people are born with without their control. Race is one of those things too. And just like it really sucks to live with dyspraxia, be born with dyspraxia, people who are able-bodied have real problems too. And people who don't have any kind of disability do still have problems too, and their lives can suck too. And to completely discredit that or say that's not as bad is just as toxic as completely undermining the struggles that us with individuals with disabilities go through on a regular basis. You can't really talk down anybody's struggle or try to make it look less than someone else's, because then you're just as bad as the people who are oppressing you. But you can't do the whole all lives matter thing, or the whole, all people should be equal and all people should be respectful of each other thing, because then the other side is going to see that as you specifically attacking the people standing up for the oppressed minority. And well, yeah, that's not cool either. You definitely shouldn't understate that. It's also not wrong to accept that there's a privileged, either by genetics or whatever, individual who is still going through a tough time and is just as prone towards depression or anxiety as any single one of us because of life circumstances. And then putting somebody like me or someone like, Crystal Bella Shaw or even Boogie on a pedestal and praising them because they're different. Honestly, we're all different. It's what makes us human, is the variance in our personalities and brain chemistry. And to single any one person out, either by health or, disease even, is just kind of fucked up in general. We shouldn't be attacking each other in general. No one's a bad person. If one person's a bad person, then I'm a bad person and you're a bad person. Because every single one of us is capable of doing good and bad things. And yes, there are people out there who do a lot more bad than good. But being born white or being born not disabled is not one of those factors that should dictate anyone's opinion on anybody else. And that's the same with being born black or being born disabled. It shouldn't matter. Any sort of predisposition that nobody has any, real control over should matter, because there are plenty of people with disabilities who are total dicks who definitely shouldn't have the platforms that they have. And this is one of my biggest political discourses that I've been trying to avoid bringing up in videos, but I really felt the need to get this out here, especially in this big follow-up video. So, if anyone wants to see my whole political idea of political correctness and disabilities and ableism, there it is. I also do want to say a couple of things about anti-vaxxers, essential oils, and the health industry as a whole. I can understand why people are afraid of the health industry, especially with how the news portrays the health industry. It's very rare that you hear about breakthroughs unless they're the cure for cancer, supposedly, even though it hasn't been proven or, tested to any real extent. Or unless they're highlighting these huge malpractices or these doctors overprescribing opiates or whatever. And even then, usually they're not telling you the whole story. The news kind of exists for profit now. It's not like it used to be. And because they exist for profit, they're going to go with what makes the most money, regardless of how factual that may be at the time. This is why almost every little scientific study that's about to be done on cancer and may not even be completed or even started yet and has just been hypothesized tends to get overblown and then shown on all those viral clickbait sites as the cure-all for cancer. And the human mind is really susceptible to confirmation bias. I've made it no secret that I'm a professional wrestling fan, and really, should I be? I mean, there's a lot that's wrong with professional wrestling too, and I'm really not going to get too much into that. But we talk about scummy industries and we talk about the health industry, and yes, there is corruption there, but there's corruption in just about every industry. And I've mentioned this in every video that I went on this rant in, that, the distrust in medicine is ridiculous from our perspective and even my own personal perspective. It kind of seems out there. But when you take a minute to empathize and, look at why anti-vaxxers say what they say, it's kind of easy to see why, especially when you do take into account how autism is portrayed in a generalized, form. And as someone who is now coming to admit that the generalization of certain topics definitely makes them look more extreme than they definitely are, you could see why someone would see such portrayals of autism, see a possible cure or possible mitigation that seems harmless and is backed by any sort of papers they can find, which, with the misinformation and the way journalism is done on the internet, kind of makes it easier to find. And yeah, at the end of the day, what more does any parent want than what's best for their child? And you can see why they go into defense mode and fight for the whole anti-vax movement or the essential oils curing everything. Although that's more of a cult thing and even more sinister than the whole anti-vax thing. And well, there's whole channels dedicated to like the whole MLM essential oils thing. That's not my place. But as a father, I do want to say, as much as I disdain the whole anti-vax movement and how it threatens my children and just about everyone else's children, I also kind of understand why they feel the way they do. And it's because of this that you really can't just go at them guns blazing. You have to kind of approach them from a logical and personable perspective, because the more you fight them and the more you come at them with anger, the more it's going to make them believe that they're being oppressed, and the more they're going to buy into what they buy into. Simply put, confirmation bias is one of the biggest things, and there's a million psychology channels on YouTube that'll explain that for you. I'm not going to go too in depth on confirmation bias. If anything, it should be common knowledge for most of my subs anyway. Dyspraxia is known for creating intelligence. And intelligence is what my next video is going to be on, so try to keep that in mind. And that's all for this part of the video. It's more of a follow-up, a little bit of informational and opinional. And again, if there's anything else you guys want me to touch on, just leave it in the comments and I'll touch on it in another video as well. But my next video is going to be about the whole idea of intelligence with dyspraxia, why we may be perceived as more intelligent, and whether or not we really actually are more intelligent or not. So watch out for that next week as we continue into part 2 of this video. Now, as you can see, I'm in my pajamas here. I'm relaxing on a beach chair, or an outdoor chair too. And I can actually lounge in this thing, so I'll bring the camera up here so you guys can see me for this part of the video. You see, for some reason, YouTubers tend to act super lax and sit in a beach chair and dress in their pajamas for Q&A videos, so don't worry, I came prepared. And just like I had implied in my 100 subs video, I really didn't anticipate a whole lot of questions. This part is going to be short. In fact, all of my questions came from the same YouTuber, and I'd like to appreciate that YouTuber and give him a shout out. That YouTuber is ECHX, and he does have some really artistic videos. He used to have a video about dyspraxia. I don't know, it looks like he took it down. But he's only got 24 subs, and I really wish he would make more content again, because his stuff is real interesting. But he's been a long-term subscriber, a long-term follower of this channel, as well as on Discord. I think he's one of the only like not personal friends I have that actually use my Discord or have used my Discord. It's kind of a graveyard right now, unfortunately. But my boy ECH asks, what are some positive or negative experiences because of my dyspraxia that have stuck with me specifically, as well as what music do I like? Now, to answer ECHX's first question, I'd say one of my biggest negative experiences that really showed how dyspraxia affects me would be my time in the military, which to date is still one of the most confusing things to try to explain to people. Simply put, I was injured at basic training. So it's kind of debatable whether or not you'd consider me a veteran, especially considering the fact that I enlisted in the U.S. Army National Guard. And because of that, my contract started when I swore in at processing before I even went to basic training. So technically, if you count the numbers and everything, I was in the Army for roughly 8 months to a year, even though I was at basic training for roughly 2 to 3 months. And even then, didn't graduate. And like the last month was spent at the like little reception battalion thing. But at the same time, the military is really good at one thing, and that's really showing you what your strengths and weaknesses are at the rawest point. Even at basic training, and I would say, if anything, especially at basic training, especially for people who may or may not have ever been deployed, basic training isn't easy for even the typical person. And that's something that many of my drill sergeants were reminding me as I was going through the deep depression, being told that my dream was over. But the whole experience really does kind of put you in survival mode. As they always say, when you're at basic training, the whole goal is to break you down to your basic, human survival parts and then build you back up as a soldier. And obviously, as someone who, didn't complete and only made it like roughly, I don't know, like 2.5 months into basic, and I was supposed to be there for 3, and didn't even make it to the advanced training portion. It really did humble me a lot and show me a lot of my weaknesses that I was never really, all that into confronting and facing personally. And even after I'd spent so much time trying to hide, but after doing a lot more reflection, kind of started realizing all my strengths and weaknesses. And when put into any sort of survival scenario where you're forced to use your best attributes and your weaknesses are legitimate weaknesses that could put your life in danger, then yes, you do kind of learn to appreciate and see these things that really tend to stick with you in the long term. As for music, my favorite band is Motorhead. My favorite album is Werewolf Hologram by Esid. He's like an underground rapper. And my favorite song is I'm Not Okay by My Chemical Romance, just because it's so cringy and I love it very much. It's just a reminder of how edgy I was in high school. And the weird thing about, us in high school, anyone going through high school and then graduating and going on into adulthood, is it's kind of like how Bowling for Soup put it, that high school never ends. It seems like we never really stop being edgy once we become adults. We just kind of make it a little bit more subtle, and that's just great. So, part of this channel update, I do really want to drive the point home that yes, there may be another week or two where I don't put out my usual dyspraxia content. Simply put, even making this video was a real labor of love. And if I'm being honest, I definitely had to smoke a little bit of that, that, that stuff I'm kind of known for, unfortunately, here, just in order to get my inflammation and just the general air of sickness off of me. And even then, for like the past week or so, that didn't help at all. If anything, it made it worse because it made me cough more. But I'm starting to get better enough that I can smoke and at least get through a video like this and be able to get this out at least. But some people who have followed me on Discord at least will know that I do have 2 bands. One is a solo project, and the other I have a drummer for. And so we're actually going to be going on tour for March through roughly July, like the beginning of July. We're probably going to end at the July 4th show, to be honest. But we're touring with a real old school hardcore punk band called the A-Town Sluts. And I want to try to record one of my videos, like one of my sets at least, and just upload it on this channel, and maybe do a little commentary or something. Just because there's something weird about being a musician with dyspraxia. I actually do a couple of certain things, little modifications with my amplifier and everything, just to kind of make it easier for me to play. In fact, the style of music I play is also kind of reflective of my dyspraxia because it allows for a lot more mistakes. And really, my focus tends to be on my vocals and on my lyrics more than the guitar play. The guitar play tends to be more chords, and when there is a solo, there's usually a phaser applied. Again, I'll go more in depth when I do that video, but I really do want to highlight the struggles and also some of the positives that have come with dyspraxia that have affected my little hobby as a musician. Because by no means would I ever make any of my bands a career. It's always been kind of a hobby for me, especially being hardcore punk and, stoner metal. It's not really a genre you hear on the radio often. But that's it for this video. I know it was long, it was ranty, and I'm sick as hell. But thank you guys for the 100 subs, for like everything. And all the support I've gotten, all the people I've helped too. Man, I'm happy to have you guys too. I didn't expect any of this, and you guys are awesome. So thanks for this. Watch out for the intelligence video whenever my lungs decide to stop filling with fluid. And you guys have a good one.